I'm Gerald Bentley. This is Wrestling with Sales. Today, we're going international, going across the ocean to China, and we are going to talk about the birth of American pro wrestling in China with Adrian Gomez, the president and founder of Middle Kingdom Wrestling. Adrian, thanks for joining us here on Wrestling with Sales. I wanted to talk with you since I've started following you on LinkedIn, and I just think it's an amazing story that you've started a professional wrestling company in China. And it's really kind of untapped, considering it's one of the biggest entertainment markets in the world. Now, movies now, their success or failure hinges on how well it does in China. But there really wasn't hardly any pro wrestling until you got going. And I just want to ask you, what led you from Arizona to Shanghai to run a professional wrestling company?
First, thanks for having me on the show, Gerald.
Sure.
I appreciate your interest in Chinese wrestling. It's still a very niche topic, so thanks for wanting to spotlight this.
Sure, absolutely.
To answer your question about what brought me to China was actually I've just always been interested in traveling. My pretty much growing up in college, I was obsessed with Anthony Bourdain,
Okay.
and yeah, the places he went to and the way the stories he told on his shows and also in his books, just kind of always put that travel bug in me to want to live abroad. And while my original intention to go to China was not to go there and start a pro wrestling organization. That's something that eventually happened later down the line. However, I went to China because I always wanted to live in Eastern, whether it was Southeast Asia or Eastern Asia or even
Uh-huh.
like South America. I ended up settling in China. But I actually had intentions of moving several different places. But as you can see, I'm still in China. I opened a business in China, so here's where I am now.
Yeah, you know what really is interesting to me, and I think it's applicable to so many people, so many different things. A lot of people are, they're prisoners of their own device, right? Just like the song. And you're so locked into doing what you do because it's what you've always done. It's comfortable. I'm not going to challenge anything. I'm not going to push any boundaries. But I mean, you really took the Anthony Bourdain show to heart. No reservations. Let's just go. Could you even speak the language when you moved there?
No, I didn't. I didn't. I didn't know anything. Literally anything. And like you said, it was literally like no reservations. Like I didn't plan for it. I just kind of did it over literally over a period of like 2 weeks. I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna do this, and I ended up finding an English teaching job,
Uh-huh.
and you know, just got on a plane and there and I landed, and it was a strange new world for sure.
And, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but in auto sales training, there's lots of trainers who talk about how your single biggest challenge is to create common ground with your customers, and that a good salesperson can get dropped into any dealership anywhere in the country. And within about 30 seconds, just asking a few questions can find common ground with someone. Eh, Do you find that to be true? Did you find that to be true when you got dropped into China? Were you able to create some? Obviously, you have, but create some relationships and find areas to move forward with people really quickly.
Well, at the end of the day, I think we all as people, we all really have the essential as far as common goes, whether regardless if where you're from.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as being able to start interpersonal relationships with people, I didn't find that to have much barrier actually, especially if the language barrier wasn't too high between some people. Now keep in mind, I was in an English school environment, so several of the
Sure.
Chinese were at least on an elementary level of English speaking. But as relationships developed, and one of the things I did bring with me from America to China was my fandom for professional
Okay.
wrestling. For a while, I did start to try to, see what the average person thought of professional wrestling, or if they had even known of its existence at all. So, it started with very basic common ground, and definitely as a wrestling fan, I did want to meet other wrestling fans, especially in China.
Now, what kind of presence of pro wrestling is there in China? I mean, I know if you're talking Marvel superheroes, you're going to get a ton of interest because our U.S. movies do tremendously over there. But do people know
Mhm.
into the weeds of the WWE? They just kind of know, oh, yeah, American wrestlers, and not sure, okay, he's in the WWE, he's in Impact, he's in AEW.
Mhm. Well, when I first got to China, I would say wrestling was less known than it is now. So let's keep in mind this is a 13-year period between
Okay.
2010 and 2013 and 2023. So in 2010, at that time, I would say really most people didn't know what. But let's and for wrestling, let's just use the WWE.
Sure.
Most people didn't know what the WWE was. Now today, I would say almost everybody is at least familiar with the WWE, and that is in part because a lot has happened in the last 13 years I've been here. One thing in particular is that WWE did open a Shanghai office. And they did tour, and they ended up doing official tours in that period of time. They hired Chinese wrestlers. They had a big tryout in 2016. They did another tryout in 2019. And if they toured here, so that marketing effort and those tours has allowed people to at least associate wrestling with WWE. So maybe they don't know
Okay.
exactly what is wrestling, but they know WWE.
And now the goal, and I'll ask you how it got started, but just to show the logo, there it is, Middle Kingdom Wrestling, right there. Just going to get a quick word in from
Yeah.
our sponsor at Montway Auto Transport. Now, they can move cars all around the country. I don't know if they can get a car all the way out to China, but hey, as a dealer, you spend a lot of time buying cars at auction. I mean, you just do. If you're using Edge Pipeline to manage your purchases, then Montway Auto Transport has some great news for you. They just found a much better way to move the cars back and forth. They've partnered with Auction Edge to add a transportation option to Edge Pipeline. Now dealers can manage their auction buys and book transportation with just one click right in the Edge Pipeline platform. As a nationwide leader in auto transport, Montway understands the dealer's need for speed and efficiency and can arrange single or multi vehicle moves from the auction to any lot in the country. With Montway's technology, dealers can gain full transport visibility and tracking after an order has been booked, making it much easier to manage inventory. Buy, ship, and track all in Edge Pipeline. Go to www.montway.com to learn more. So that way you can get your cars back and forth. And like I said, I don't know if they can quite get from China all the way to your dealership, wherever that may be, but very accessible anywhere you buy a car in America. Right there at www.montway.com/WS. But now, hey, getting back to it, Middle Kingdom Wrestling. I love the logo. You got the big fist. You got the initials worked in there. How exactly did it start? Because okay, now we know you left Arizona, you went to China to do probably an easy job, right? Get into not an easy job, but it's a job that was accessible because you're teaching English, and there's a lot of English teaching that goes on there. A lot more Chinese people speak English, and American people can speak Chinese, which maybe should be worked on, but that's another show. So now you're there, you're teaching. How were you able to go ahead and start a pro wrestling company? How did that come about?
Well, I'm not gonna say like I never had aspirations to open a wrestling company. I was definitely a big fan of going to independent wrestling shows in America.
Hmm.
I would I would attend local shows all the time, and try to kind of get in their circle. The promoters there, the wrestlers there, trying to like
Sure.
pick up some knowledge, see if I where I could work out as far as like maybe volunteering something to do something like set up chairs or maybe manage, picking up wrestlers, that kind of thing. So in that period, I was actually thinking maybe a year before I left about kind of seriously about getting into wrestling. Of course,
Okay.
when I went to China, idea was totally dropped. And it wasn't until maybe about a year after the luster of like the shine of living in a new country kind of wore off, and I was able, and eventually the person, my goals, my aspirations that I had before I left China, they were starting to come out a bit. Like, you know what? Like, there's no reason. I started thinking more about my plan that I had while I was in America about maybe doing a wrestling show, maybe not a wrestling company, but a wrestling show. So as I
Uh-huh.
spent more time in the next 4 or 5 years in China, I really started like doing like small surveys. Like maybe I would ask my students like, who here knows WWE? Like this is not part of the lesson plan, but I would like start surveying like people about like wrestling just to know what kind of uh what kind of knowledge do fans have, or do not fans, my students have about wrestling. And
Sure.
eventually I started, picking around, checking the internet, and just learning, what, there's not really wrestling in China that's, well, at least I'm not going to say there wasn't any wrestling. There's certainly some one-offs. There were one-offs that were happening in China. Um, and the only person who was doing wrestling kind of seriously was a wrestler named The Slam. And I ended up contacting him. I was able to get his direct contact, and I said to him, I like what you're doing. Because he built his own wrestling ring. He built his own wrestling ring. So when I contacted him, I asked him, I think it's really cool that you're doing this. I said, I have this plan and I might need you. And he's just kind of jumped in. He's like, "Oh, if you're gonna do wrestling, then yeah, I'll help you." So then
Okay.
he pulled in other people, like this person can help you, this person can help you, and it was a lot of other people who also had this dream of making wrestling, and they all kind of joined me. And that's kind of was the beginning of Middle Kingdom Wrestling (MKW), which was in 2015, um,
Okay.
where
Yeah.
it
So a lot of
was
a lot
just
of relationships, pulling people together, and like you said, with working with independent wrestling, there's always something to do, right? There's always a need for a little more help because it's on a much more granular level. It's not the big, huge corporate exercise that you see in the WWE or AEW, where they have a staff of 200 coming to put on the show. It's four or five people that are working part time, kind of stringing it together. And you were able to get enough people together to get it going. But now, I mean, you just had your first big show since the COVID shutdown, your championship Supercard from Shanghai. And if people get a chance, if they connect with you on LinkedIn, search online, take a look at some of the pictures of the show. It looks like an American, a Japanese pro wrestling show. You have the big video wall, you got a nice packed venue, just really elaborate production, and it's also going to be available on streaming. I know you have an exclusive rights contract. Where can people see this big championship supercard?
Right. So the championship supercard from Shanghai event was our first major event of 2023. And actually, the first time we could sell tickets to an event since the original COVID lockdown in China.
Sure.
So, there was a fervor of energy of people really wanting to put on a great spectacle, and I think we pulled it off. We did it in Shanghai. We had a lot of great media attention. Reuters was there to cover us, the China Project, and other major news organizations. And we recorded this show for two different platforms. One, the English version will be on the Premiere, which actually is available now. So
Okay.
it's available now. Check out the premiere, the whole show, plus all of our other legacy content. And we also recorded the show in VR as well. So if you guys watch the show, you'll see that there's if you watch the 2D show, the two-dimensional show,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see that there's a lot of interesting, elaborate cameras everywhere. That's the 360 VR camera. So we actually were also able to sell the rights to ByteDance. So ByteDance is the parent company of TikTok,
TikTok.
and
Sure.
yeah, and they bought the rights to the VR version of the video. So we have the video in English on Premiere Streaming Network, and then we also have the video in VR. If you have a VR headset, it's coming July 15th to Pico, which is a VR video platform. If you do have the VR goggles.
Oh, that's really neat. So, yeah, you guys are getting it together, and then you're planning on doing a couple of big shows a year. And now, after the COVID shutdown, getting it back rolling again, you've actually made Middle Kingdom Wrestling full-time job. You have a couple of producers working with you. What's next? What do you see happening in the next year or two for Middle Kingdom Wrestling?
Well, the next event we're planning on is in December. So we not going to talk too much about that right now, but
Okay.
it is we're going to have one more event this year in December, and we plan to go all out and hopefully make as much buzz as we can, and just showcase Chinese wrestling. Meanwhile, we want to continue to use our resources that we are with our partnerships like Premier Streaming Network, also the VR partnership we have with Pico, and
Hmm.
also in between that we have a strong partnership with wrestling companies across Southeast Asia and Japan. So we're planning on sending some of our champions, for example, to Singapore, to
Okay.
Philippines, Malaysia. So that will that's a really strong partnership that we have through the China Belt and Road Initiative. So that's what we'll be covering for the rest of the year, and hopefully by next year we can go back to a more consistent schedule. Prior to the COVID shutdown, from like 2017, 2018, 2019,
Hmm.
we had shows every 3 months.
Okay.
We had shows every quarter we had a show, and hopefully we can get back to that schedule by next year. But this year we're just focusing on these two big shows. Um, Thankfully we got one out of the way, and
Hmm.
it was a very positive experience, and hopefully with this next one, we can move towards a more consistent schedule again, just like prior to the COVID pandemic.
Well, and there is pro wrestling in really huge levels in most of the Asian countries. So that would be a really great exposure to get some of your wrestlers out there in the other countries and almost do a series like the NWA restarted with the 10 pounds of gold. Just follow your champions as they go through the other countries.
Yeah, that's actually kind of the concept that we were kind of coming up with. We don't want it to just be like a one-off. What we hope to do here is document this experience of our wrestlers going to these other countries, kind of like in a vlog style format, so that it's not
Uh-huh.
just like a match. It's not just a match, that there's more to it than just a match. This is, like you said, it's a traveling champion going abroad and showcasing, representing the brand, and also going on this international tour that kind of lets fans at home feel, wow, these wrestlers, they do live this kind of lifestyle. We want to present the lifestyle of a champion.
Sure. And create that kind of superhero, bigger than life experience, which I think is a lot of how pro wrestling really resonates with people.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
you see The Rock, just this last week, you saw Sting at 64 years old climbing up on a ladder, jumping out of the ring into two tables and Sammy Guevara. I mean, it's just inhuman. You just don't do that. So
Yeah,
it's great
yeah.
if you can make those kind
and
of
and
connections.
and like you said, just something that people at home who are watching, that they can feel that this is a different level of either a different level of athleticism or a different level of a lifestyle. So that's why, like you said, like a traveling, showing that kind of traveling champion lifestyle, we hope to uh, utilize that kind of effect in our marketing later this year.
And
Yeah,
you can
that's
see some
Nora
of the
Phoenix Diana.
champions here. Yeah.
Nora Phoenix Diana, actually, she's a big deal. So she is Malaysia's first wrestler, and a female wrestler, and not just female wrestler. She's the first hijabi wearing pro wrestler in the world. She's actually sponsored by Marvel Asia, and she was
Oh,
featured
really?
on Forbes. Yeah, and she was featured on Forbes 30 under 30.
Well,
So
so that is
uh,
making that connection then. I mean, literally the connection to the superheroes.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. To be sponsored by Marvel or to be featured on Forbes 30 under 30. She's a wrestler that I've actually wanted to bring to China for a long time. Again, the border was closed in China for almost 3 years, so we were not able to bring in international wrestlers during that time. But she is a part of a class of first wrestlers to come into China for the purpose of wrestling since the border opened.
Yeah, it's got to feel good getting things back opened up. I listened to Will Ospreay talking about staying in Japan during the COVID period and just how he was basically stuck in his apartment but couldn't leave. I'd imagine you have a similar story.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Japan's COVID lockdowns, they're quite a bit more. I mean, if we're comparing it to America, America, I know there was a lockdown in America, but America was not locked down. It just wasn't. Like, there was other countries where, Japan was locked down, China was super locked down. So, it's a different experience. I'm not saying that people didn't suffer as far as like maybe businesses were closed during that period of time and people working from home, but you still were able to go out in America. You
Yeah.
were still able to go out and leave your home without like doing the COVID test. But in a lot of these Asian countries, like China, Japan, it was a very, very tight lockdown compared to the West.
Yeah, I mean, in America, it was okay, maybe you couldn't go to your store of choice, but every Target was open. Nobody was stopping you between driving from Missouri to Illinois or Illinois to
Right,
Ohio.
right.
And in the the Orient, I mean, you're there, and you may not even be able to leave your city. So it
Exactly. Oh, yeah,
had to really be kind
it's-
of shocking when you're starting up your own business. You're just getting some momentum, and then get the hammer dropped
it
on you. So
stopped.
it's awesome that you're able to get it back going again.
Yeah, and actually, the COVID experience, we were able to do a lot of unique things. So, I
Hmm.
mean, we created a studio show. We produced almost 50 episodes of MKW Blast Off. And that was actually like, this was like a weekly show and like a weekly
Okay.
45-minute show. So, I mean, and this was an experience that probably we wouldn't have been able to do if we were, if we had the schedule from before. So doing the studio show, producing content, more more focused story episodic content, considering it was a weekly show online.
Hmm.
And there was also a lot of other cool things that we were able to experiment with during COVID lockdown. Unfortunately, a lot of them didn't make money, but
Yeah.
um, thankfully, thankfully it was a learning experience for us.
Well, hey, let's go ahead and we'll wind it down here. Go to the championship round. Got the dealership rescue belts for you. So another title for Middle Kingdom Wrestling. Just going to ask you a few quick questions. What got
Nice
you
belt.
interested in pro wrestling initially? What got you started in wrestling?
Oh, what got me interested in wrestling is I rented a video game uh, from Blockbuster. My parents would
Okay.
every weekend, if I got like a good mark on if I got a good test score or something, my dad would say, "Okay, you can rent one game this weekend." I rented WCW versus NWO World Tour. I played the heck out of that game. I kind of looked at it as just a video game. I returned it to Target after 2-3 days once it was due. And then one
Hmm.
day I turn on the TV and I see all the characters that I played as a video game. I saw Hulk Hogan and I saw Sting. And those were the two characters I played as in the video game, Hulk Hogan and Sting. And I thought, oh my God, that's them, but
Yeah.
real. Yeah, and that's kind of when I just fell into the world. It was a video game crossover that kind of like made my fandom go to the next level.
I think that's true for a lot of people in America because that was the cinematic era of WCW. That was the 83 weeks that they beat WWE, and Sting was
Mm-hmm.
the crow Sting coming out of the rafters and taking out the ring with the baseball bat. And amazing, he's still going now.
This is March of 1998, so
Hmm.
that's like I was like right in the middle. I was right in the middle of the 83 weeks.
Yeah, definitely impactful. Where do you want to see Middle Kingdom Wrestling in, let's say, 5 years?
I would like to see Middle Kingdom Wrestling have a fair and sustainable deal with a streaming partner um, in China. We have had partnerships with streaming partners that have actually been able to keep us afloat. But if we were for the next level, I would want something that not only keeps us afloat, but also makes us be able to be profitable and also able to deliver a really great product that we can't right now because of budgetary reasons. So I would like to have a partnership with a streaming company in China that's long term and fair.
Okay, that definitely is a part of it. Gets TV money. How about do you see a partnership in the offing with either an American or a Japanese pro wrestling company?
Well, actually, we do have we are pretty close with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. So
Okay.
actually, David Marquez and those group of guys. Prior
Hmm.
to COVID, I invited loads of those guys to China. Peter Avalon, Raylan, the Rockness Monsters. Invited quite a few people because it was a
Okay.
partnership with Championship Wrestling from Hollywood. Now, since then, of course, it's been about 3 years since the last time we were able to do that. But I'd like to explore that more in the future. Now that borders are open.
So there's a chance that Pretty Peter Avalon could be in a Shanghai ring within the next year.
Well, he was in a Harveen ring before, but
Okay.
yeah, we invited him. We invited him in 2019 he actually had a match. Pretty Peter Avalon. He had a match in China with MKW. But yeah, I love working with him. He's a great guy. I actually got to see him recently at their Arizona show. I was in
Uh-huh.
Arizona in December, and they had a really big show in Phoenix. It was really nice, and I got to hang out with Peter Avalon and David Marquez in that time. So yeah, I'd love to see him come back here.
Great. And finally, what American pro wrestling are you watching now?
I watch AEW because I think AEW is a very interesting product. I think WWE is doing better than ever from a financial point of view, from a production point of view, also from a storyline point of view. I do enjoy watching WWE, but I pay a little bit more attention to AEW just because I like to see I like the unpredictableness of it. I appreciate their fight every week because WWE, they're not fighting right now. They're producing a really nice product right now, but they are not in it to fight. They're they're too big to fail. They've reached
Yeah,
that
they're on
level.
top.
And AEW, I think, is kind of interesting to watch because you can see how much they are trying. I'm not saying everything lands perfectly, but I can see that every week they are trying to pop a rating. Every week they are trying to do a viral moment. Every week they're trying to be the top. You can feel that energy
Sure.
from them. So that's why I pay attention more to AEW. But of course, nobody can deny the how influential and iconic and how must pay attention to is the WWE. Um, but AEW, I pay a little bit more attention from an entertainment point of view.
Makes sense. Good to know. And then just to kind of wind it down, everybody that's watching, you can go ahead, you can reach out and you can follow Adrian Gomez on LinkedIn. He's got a good page, gets a lot of details. There's some great coverage of Middle Kingdom Wrestling. You can find Middle Kingdom Wrestling on the Premier Streaming Network and definitely look forward to more. It's the biggest entertainment market in the world. To paraphrase the Pro Wrestling Hall of Famer Raven, why not Middle Kingdom? It's the chance to succeed, and we'll be watching you guys as you step into the ring and fight. Adrian, thanks for joining me here on Wrestling with Sales. Really appreciated it.
Thank you so much for having me on, Gerald. It's been really fun.
Absolutely. Thanks.